Okay, so we now have the seventh exercise. Here we are given two sets A and B, and we would say that A has lesser or equal cardinality to B if there is an injective function, an injection from A into B, A as domain and B as range. Note that this definition does not say whether A is finite or infinite, or whether B is finite or infinite. It's a general definition for any two sets. Now if A and B are both finite sets, then we have to show that A has lesser or equal cardinality to B if and only if this inequality is true, because if A and B are finite, then these are natural numbers, so this is an ordinary inequality. So let us see how we can get the solution. So we have to prove two things here. If we assume this, then this has to be shown, and if we assume this, then we have to prove that A has lesser or equal cardinality to B. So first, assume that A has lesser or equal cardinality to B. That means by definition there is an injective function. So there exists an injective function f from A to B. Now because A and B are given to be finite, so we are in a position to use proposition 3614, the one named cardinal arithmetic, by parts C and D of proposition 3614 we have this. You see, by part D, we know that if A is a finite set and there is a function like this, then cardinality of A is less than or equal to the cardinality of f of A, and f of A is also a finite set. However, if that function additionally is injective also, then we have equality in place of that inequality. And by part C, we know that because FA is a subset of B and B is given to be finite, so FA is finite and its cardinality is less than or equal to the cardinality of B. So that's how we are getting this inequality. So our assumption that A has lesser or equal cardinality to B has led us to this conclusion. Now we will prove the converse. Conversely, we assume this. Okay, then the set of all natural numbers lying between 1 and cardinality of A is a subset of the set of all natural numbers lying between 1 and cardinality of b. It's a consequence of this inequality, because you see, you take an element here that will be less than or equal to this natural number, but this is less than or equal to this, so that element will be less than or equal to this, and as such that element will belong to this set. So this is a subset of this. Now define exploiting this fact that this is a subset of this, we are now going to define a function f1 from the first set into the second set. By this formula, f1 of I is defined to be equal to I. This formula makes sense because since this is a subset of this, so the output is I, means it will belong to this. Input is here, so that belongs to also the range, and in fact we have already come across this function. It's known as an inclusion function. Do you remember at the end of the section where we discussed mappings, there in one exercise we had this situation. If A is a subset of B, then we defined a map like this from A to B, and the definition of the map, the formula for the map is like this. The input and the output are the same, and it makes sense because A is a subset of B. We also noted one more thing, that this map is injective, and in the particular case where B is equal to A, the inclusion map is known as the identity map on A. So it's the inclusion map from this set into this set. Note that F1 is injective. Okay, now from the fact that A and B are finite, we are going to get two more mappings. They are bijections. Also, there exist bijections say F2 from A into the set of all natural numbers lying between 1 and the cardinality of A. This is a consequence of the finiteness of A, and F3 from B to such a set which involves the cardinality of B. Okay, before I run out of ink, I think I'm already running out of ink. Let me just refill a bit. I hope you can see this part. This is cardinality of B. We are now going to use these three functions to get a function from A into B, which will be injective. and that will get the job done. Using these functions, we get the following function. Okay, let's see what we have done here. If we take any element in A, on that if we apply F2, the result will be there in this set, and this set happens to be the domain of F1. So on that result we can apply F1. That will take us to this set, which is the range of F3. Now since F3 is bijective, its inverse exists, so the inverse will take us from this set into B. So we do get a function from A into B, and it is well defined. But what else is true? Note that this is injective because F3 inverse, F1 and F2 are all injective. F1 is injective, we have already noted that here. F2 is injective because F2 is a bijective function, so it's in particular injective. And what about F3 inverse? F3 is a bijection, so F3 inverse exists, and and the inverse itself is a bijection, so it's in particular an injection. So that's why all these are injective, and so their composition is also injective. So that's it, we have found an injection from A to B. So A has lesser or equal cardinality to B. Lesser or equal cardinality to B, and that completes the solution. The next one also is like that, but it will take us in some other direction. Let A and B be sets such that there exists an injection. that is A has lesser or equal cardinality to B. Okay, so that is given. Show that there exists a surjection G from B to A. This we have to prove, and the converse to this assertion is also true, but for that we need the axiom of choice. That is a remark. The converse to this statement requires the axiom of choice. So for this we have to, when we will see chapter 8, there we will come across the things. Okay, so here we try to solve this, but in the beginning itself we encounter a problem. The exercise, the way it has been written, it's not entirely correct. The above assertion is false in this particular case. If A is empty and B is non-empty. Why? You see, if our first set is the empty set, then we do have a function from the empty set into any set, and that is nothing but the empty function for that particular range. We have already discussed this when we defined empty function in the chapter on functions, and there we have also seen that this function is injective. So it satisfies the first condition what is given to us. But in this case, you cannot define a function from B into the empty set, because B is non-empty. If you go back to the definition of mappings or functions, in such a case we cannot define a function, let alone having a surjective function. So in this case the assertion is false. We do have an injective function, but there is no surjective function. In fact, there is no function at all. So that's why, because of this small mistake, we have to additionally assume that A is non-empty. It's a mistake on Terence Tau's part, but nothing major. We can rectify it and we can proceed with the rectification. Okay, so we assume A is non-empty. Because A is non-empty, we can choose an element. Any element A belonging to A. Now we define a function g from B to A as follows. let B be any element in B. If B does not belong to f of A, if B does not belong to f of A, then we define G of B to be equal to that element A, what we have chosen here. If B belongs to f of A, then we define G of B to be the unique element of the set F inverse of B. Okay, so what is happening here? In this form it may be slightly difficult to understand what we have done, but we can draw a little figure and the situation will be much more clear. You see, we have a function from f from A into B, and under that function we have the image of the domain also, entire domain. It is the set of all outputs. This set may or may not be equal to the entire range B. Okay, that's not our concern. Now, if instead of the original function f from A to B, you consider this function f from A to f of A, then this is a bijective function. So that means A is in a one-to-one correspondence with f of A. So what we are doing is this: we are choosing any element of B. That element, if it lies outside of f of A, if there is an outside, and if it lies outside of f of A, then we are mapping it onto that chosen element A. However, if it lies in f of A, then since there is a one-to-one correspondence between A and f of A, according to that one-to-one correspondence, this B will correspond to something here. That something usually makes up the set F inverse of B. Note that F inverse of B by definition is actually not an element, it's a set. It is the set of those elements whose F images are equal to B. But because F is injective, so that's why this set is having a single element. You see, all the things have to be used here. Because we are taking an element in f of A, the inverse image of that element, first of all, is a non-empty set. There is something that is giving us B, but there is not more than one something. That is because that will otherwise injectivity of F will be violated. So the fact that this is surjective takes care of the non-emptiness of this set, and the fact that F is injective takes care of the fact that in that set there is only one element. That element we are defining to be the image of B under G. In other words, we are just trying to find that element which is associated to B by this one-to-one correspondence. You apply G on B or F inverse on B, you get that element. You apply F on that element, you get B. So that is the one-to-one correspondence, and this is our function G. Okay. Okay, before I clean this part, let us quickly see that this G is actually a well-defined function. Why? We are taking any element from B. If that element lies outside of f of A, then the image is A. This image first of all exists in A and is unique. However, if our element B lies here, then its image under G again is in A and it is unique, and that uniqueness is taken care of by injectivity of F. So that's why G is well defined. Now clearly we are not going to write all these things in detail. We will just simply write like this. It's easy to see that G is well defined. Now we want to show that G is surjective, because that's why we are doing all these things. Now we want a surjection from B to A. Next, let C be any element in the range of G, that is A. Okay. Then f of C belongs to B, because f is a function from A into B, so f of C belongs to B, and in fact f of C actually belongs to f of A, because it's not just any element of B, but it's an output. It's an image of some element in A, so it belongs to f of A. Okay. Since okay. So now what we do, we calculate the F inverse of this. Okay, F inverse of f of C. Note that C belongs to F inverse of f of C. Why is it so? Because you see, by definition, this is the set of those elements whose F images are equal to f of C. In particular, C is one such element whose F image is equal to f of C. So C will belong to this set. If we have say D also, some other element D in this set, then the F image of D will also be equal to f of C by definition of this, and hence injectivity of F implies D is equal to C. It means that not only does C belong to this set, but this set only has C. Any element in this set has to be equal to C. This shows f inverse of f of c is equal to the singleton set C. Okay, so now we started our okay. So now you see the situation. You have f of c belonging to b, and in fact f of c belongs to f of a. So if you look at this b belongs to f of a, then we define g of b to be the unique element in the set f inverse of b. Now in place of b, you think of f of c. B belongs to f of a, f of c belongs to f of a. G of b is the unique element in this set. Now in place of b you have f of c, and the unique element in this set is c. So according to our definition of g of f of c will be equal to c. Hence, by the definition of G, we have G of f of c is equal to c. So c was any element in the range of G, that is A, and we have found an element f of c in the domain of G, that is B, whose G image is C. This means this element C is the pre-image, f of C is the pre-image of C under G. So this shows that every element in A appears as the image of something in B under the function G, and so G is onto or G is surjective. So that's what we wanted to show. We wanted to produce a function G from B to A that is surjective. Okay. And the last exercise, let A and B be finite sets.